almost blew it. Just cruising down the road here, which is super nice, super cruisy and fast. And then I see this line on my GPS and I'm like, uh-oh. I guess that's the Gold Dust Trail. Part's pretty rocky, but it looks good right down there. You ready? Yeah, you're ready. Okay, let's go. Navigation, we're going to talk about what I'm eating, and we'll touch on also Mira, and a little bit about budgeting is the other thing that we'll do here as well. This has been the hardest video I think I've ever had to make. I've shot this so many times. Yeah, navigation. So let's start with the obvious. In 2023, made all kinds of mistakes, navigation errors, or didn't have in my head or have a plan about where I wanted to get to each day. Some of the errors that I made could have been way worse, but it meant that I didn't have enough food sometimes to get to the next place. I ran out, water, all of these kind of things. And I think that could be avoided with some planning. And so I just want to show you guys what I'm doing differently this year in 2025 for myself and Mira. We were the first team to ride as a dogpacking team in 23. And we started off in the Grand Depart and had equipment failures and some overuse injuries by the time we got south of Butte, Montana. And then came back and did an ITT, and my goal then was just for us to finish. So we had a much more relaxed pace, basically about 100 miles, a little bit less than that, sorry, to get to Antelope Wells. But along the way, made a lot of mistakes, learned from those mistakes, and so that's where this plan is coming from. I guess basically we'll talk about a couple of things. There's the on-bike navigation. Basically I'm using the Garmin InReach 1040, sorry, the Garmin Edge 1040, turn-by-turn navigation, great, easy to use, long battery life. The route is loaded on there. As I have that route on Ride with GPS, file here is from 2023. The route basically follows the Great Divide mountain bike route, the GDMBR, which is from the Adventure Cycling Association. And there are some differences along the way. So I have the GPX file here. I take that GPX file, I can put it onto the Garmin and onto the phone for turn-by-turn navigation on the road. But this is really about planning. This is what I mainly use Ride with GPS for, is I can break the route into smaller sections to load that onto the Garmin so that it loads faster. Easy to do that here, and then I can load all those files and then ride for a bunch of days and then switch into the next route, and they all kind of fit together. I can also export this in different formats, and that's one of the things that I'll just talk about here quickly. I won't spend a lot of time on it. So I've taken that file and I've exported it as a KML file, and this is sort of one of the planning things that I've done. Once I have that on here, the nice thing about Google Earth is I can zoom in and I can tilt it, so I can get maybe a sense of what the terrain is like, or just remind myself. Say we've left Banff, we're still in Alberta, we're riding through the Kananaskis area, and in 2023 there was an area we come out, we're almost onto the road, but we stay on some single track for a bit. And I remember there being heavily trafficked by bears, and so I just put a little marker there so I can, when I'm looking at this, I can be like, oh yeah, I gotta watch out for bears, and sort of riding along here, and I can imagine what it's like to ride through this terrain, once we're on the road and we're coming along, and we get into the entrance for the Highline Trail, so that's single track, and then on to eventually we cross the suspension bridge. I can actually see this and imagine it. Cross into British Columbia eventually, and then we're coming down the Elk Valley, and you can see the terrain on one side, that that sort of planar features of the way the mountains have uplifted in these valleys and then been scoured by the glaciers, so they're quite broad, but everything's all angled one way. And then if you look over to the north-facing side, they're much more broken and craggy, and it's just sort of, when you come in and learn the peak names and all that kind of thing. So I kind of use this just for imagineering and getting prepared. So when I'm in it, that novelty doesn't really kind of blast me. So, and that's how I use that. Sometimes I'll even put in my music, like little playlists that I've made. So there's that as part of navigation and preparation. I have a program called Map Out that I have both on the iPad and then also on the phone, and I can use that. So for example, here I have the route loaded up and it's Holland Lake, and I can do this on my phone too, and it loads up so fast. If I just tap the route, up comes this A to B point, and then it has kilometer markers along here, and I can just trace it, and it'll stay pinned to the line, and I can see, okay, there's over to Huckleberry Pass. So yeah, from Holland Lake to say Ovando, for example, there's a small resupply there, restaurant. It's kind of one of the spots. What I can also do here is if I look at the top of this, I can start to see elevation profiles. I can see there's one good sizable climb there that's about, in the 20, starts about 20 kilometers in, 25 to 30 kilometers. And so, yeah, that's around Richmond Peak, right? I know that I've ridden there, often has snow. So I can kind of imagine that and get prepared for it. During the day too, it can be like, okay, I got this climb to go over, and then we can so I can measure my energy a little bit, sort of get a bit of gauge, and I can see, oh yeah, 1,600 meters up, basically 1,600 meters down when we get to Ovando. So from Holland Lake to Ovando is, basically comes out in the wash, although you've climbed 1,600 meters over about 100 kilometers. And so I can sort of see, there's some turns to make here and that kind of thing. So that's quite useful on the phone as well. And so I could navigate by that if I had to, if the GPS head unit didn't work. So navigation, super key. So those are three of the tools that I use on the computer for navigation and planning from one of 7. Craig Fowler has put these together. Does it for other events as well, but he has northbound and southbound for the Tour Divide, and has them in metric and standard. And so this one here I have going southbound is from 23. Some things have changed and there's updates. So I also have the one from for this year, 2025, and already one update has come out, and you'll get updates up until the start of the race, I think, or till the end of the year, I think is how it works. Because some people are buying these and they're maybe touring or doing an ITT. But on this, basically he's got a legend and explainer section, and then he's got these data sheets. And so basically A to B to C with cumulative elevation changes, and then a indication of what map it might be on the ACA maps, the Adventure Cycling Association, as well as great notes, just simple notes about what resupply options are there. And that's really key. So you can plan from, getting from here to there, and then and maybe identify where the big gaps in resupply are. And then think about a strategy. For me, anyway, I'm thinking about a strategy like I want, to get a big resupply here because there's 400 kilometers between one and the next, in some places in New Mexico. So those are real key, and I make some notes. And then he's also got these town sheets, so they're great. So for example, if everything goes to plan, I'd go from Banff to Fernie on the first day, and then Fernie I could pull out this sheet here. And then on this sheet, I could just print it onto waterproof paper, for example. I could have it at hand, pull it out of my pocket, and I could see, okay, yeah, it's to Whitefish is 300 kilometers, 333 kilometers, and about 4,500 meters elevation gain. So it's a really big day, but I can see, oh yeah, so we go from Fernie, there's this campground, there's a turn at, and then, oh yeah, there's the border. So once I get to the border, I know I've done 170 kilometers basically. And then Eureka is sort of the town down the way. Oh yeah, all the services. I know there's a grocery store there and all that kind of stuff. So I can keep that in mind, and I can have goals to get to, so that I'm not taking how I feel and using that as the big decision about how far I'm gonna ride. And sometimes you need to, but it's just so easy to feel bad, to feel uncomfortable. and then think, oh, there's a good spot to camp there. Oh, I don't need to go so far today. I'm gonna try and stick to a plan as much as I can this time. We'll see how that goes. So, and then the other thing that I've done is I've taken that information from Craig's sheets and I've made kind of a run sheet. Now this is a southbound version. I have basically 3 riding blocks at about 6 hours each. Having these goals to start out with. Yeah, I'm trying to get to that place. So yeah, we're doing pretty well. We're ahead or behind what the schedule is. That could be road conditions or whatever. Things are going to be what they're going to be, but I think it's better to just be task oriented. And so yeah, wake up in the morning and just a reminder here that it's quick to pack up in the morning, 15 minutes on the bike, ride 6 hours, and I'll take some stretchy breaks, and I have to stop the bicycle for Mira to jump back into the basket. Another break there kind of in the morning, 10:30, 30 minutes. That could be a resupply, could be maintenance, a combination of things. A good opportunity to feed Mira immediately and let her have some time to digest, especially if we're gonna have a flat section. I don't wanna feed her before I know there's gonna be a lot of exercise, basically smaller snacks. Another midday riding block, again, a rest maintenance block, final evening one, and then sleep. I also have on here some notes, big things about big resupplies. For example, like down at the end, was one of the last times I ran out of food. Grant's has got Walmart and other big grocery stores in there, but it's a long way. It's like through the Gila, it's hilly, and I think you're about 400 kilometers until you get to Silver City, where I could resupply again. One of the things that happened in 2023 is that I would often stay in the bigger towns, and these hotels were really expensive. So I'm going to try and find accommodation, and sometimes it's cycling specific accommodation, and maybe try and reduce my costs a little bit. Right here I have 5 spots marked where I think I could stop, and I need those to clean my kit, maybe charge up some electronics. Good time, good to shelter from the weather. Just hop on the bike and we can go. So yeah, that's how I'll use those. Yeah, so that ends up being kind of the navigation. Introduce you to Craig, and we had a little conversation a few weeks back, discussed about these great sheets. Can you introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about your background?
My name is Craig Fowler. I grew up, the woods right behind my house here. Both my mother and father my mother worked for the town. They were both part of like land advocacy groups in the area. So I grew up with outdoors in me and did a lot of camping and fishing. But 2001, I thru hike. So I've done the big 3 in the hiking. And then I did the bike packing in 2017.
So what about the name?
1 of 7 billion was what it was when I did it in 2017. I was in my tent on the Colorado Trail and got caught in a storm above Stony Pass, snowing and rain, lightning. I got my tent at like 5 o'clock. I stayed in until like 5 the next morning, and I'm shivering with my clothes on. I'm looking at my fingers, and I could see my fingerprints. And I thought to myself, I was like, wait, we're all born 1 of 7. I don't have to do this. We're all unique. So, but the project's also about just like, reminding people that you are unique, and and just to kind of like follow your passions and follow what makes you unique. So
that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I just had to do a bit of research if we're gonna, because I had ridden it with a friend, parts of it, and we were just like, oh yeah, people race this thing, and sort of that wheel has started spinning, and I came across your product, and really helpful. There's all this information here, whether it's a through hike or bike packing, we're going to put aside this time. So there's opportunity cost, but there's the cost involved in doing the thing, the food, accommodation, equipment. And I think that's where your product really comes in handy. Is like you can really start to get a sense of it.
After I finished, I was like you said, the information is all over the web. There's no place where it's one place together. So my thought was, let's make a data list, the data sheet, which we have now, which is A to B. I say, it's from point A to point B, B to C. And then I was like, well, I should have one like the list, because if it's it's 11 o'clock and you're in a town, you're going to leave, and you don't need to know if it's 50 miles to the next town or 100, and there's no stores, you need to know what to buy. So I did the town list with the math. So but the interesting part is, like you were saying, with bike packing, you go about it. Some people have told me that part of the adventure is not knowing. But you said there's a cost involved in doing something like this, time and money and effort. So it's interesting because when I did it, I was like, I didn't do much research. And the result was I didn't know about certain things. And I kind of missed out during my trip. You know, when I did it, I would have been easier for me. So that's why I made them. But the average person, they should be doing the research too, so that they know in their head, like, oh, didn't I read something about a little hostel here? Because that's only going to help you. So
Because I'm looking at it as it's my event against the clock.
it gets hard out there. Like, you know, you get confused and like your math gets wrong. And so taking the guesswork out of it.
So how long did it take you to put this all together?
The hardest part was figuring out like the mileage, like the dirt versus pavement, you know, things like that. That was hard because like even though like you know, Ride with GPS will show you, I still had to zoom in on Google, and you can only get so far in Google satellite. You're looking, I'm like, is that dirt, pavement? And like it took a while. I mean, it took a lot of time because
when you come on the list with your data sheets and then with the town sheets, and then okay, my schedule, I figure I'm going to get to this town, and so like, oh, these two town sheets maybe aren't that useful, but this next one's going to be super useful for me, you know, and being able to print those out, say on waterproof paper to bring them along, you know, the GPX files and having them on the phone, on different apps and on the computer, and having to break them down and then trying to schedule out, and then, you know, food plans so that I don't, like, particularly in New Mexico, like in 23, I ran out of food twice. Because there are those big gaps. Like it's 400 kilometers from Cuba to Silver City or somewhere like that. To just have that sheet and be like, okay, look at this is a very important resupply. Like there are some ones that are pretty big, or stopping less and being able to just keep riding. And so I think it's super useful. So, but then beyond planning, what do you think is the biggest mental or physical thing that becomes a challenge that people underestimate on the Tour Divide? What do you think about that?
Homework's the number one thing, and just knowing the route. I mean, the whole not knowing is part of the adventure. I think is ridiculous, but that's my own view.
If someone wants to get some of these sheets, where's the best place to find them?
You can go to the website. There's the one-of-7project.com.
Yeah, full disclosure, Craig gave me a copy of the Northbound this year. But I think I bought the product in 2023, and I wouldn't have done so if I didn't think it was going to work for me. And actually, I was surprised at how good value it was, although I didn't really use it that much, and that was to my detriment, really, you know, because there's so much information in there, and if I just went through it, it got left to the last bit. There were other things I was thinking about, but the bike and the equipment and all that kind of stuff. Of course, physical training. You know, and I lacked on mental training and those things. And so I think this year I'm going to make sure that I put more effort into using those sheets and going through them and working on that stuff. I think that's where the real value is. And so I take his information and put it into my run sheet, but those town sheets are so great. So going into a grocery store with more of a plan, I think, is better for efficiency and keeping us moving, and then also it's less likely that I will miss a resupply or just not get enough food at a resupply to get through to the next one. So I made this list. So it's pretty simple. It's like I have some foods here. I was starting to put an idea of calories and whatnot, but basically there are, you know, a lot of the things that I'll be eating on the route are pre-packaged sandwiches and burritos and that sort of thing, as well as snack type foods, and then some liquids and stuff. So, you know, I basically have given myself on this sheet, and I kind of wrote it out here, kind of partly with also a plan to go into grocery stores. So when you come into these larger grocery stores in the US and Canada, typically there'll be a deli type section on one side or the other, and prepared foods and drinks, easy to grab. And so I'm gonna start there. Go into there. I'll carry a little bag that I can put these in, so it can be, you know, pre-made, unfrozen, like fresh burritos, sandwiches, some few of those. Sort of about, you can estimate those at being about 300 to 600 calories each. So I can figure that out and have a number of those to get me into the next one. Drinks, sometimes chocolate milk, you know, fat, protein, sugars. or some of the isotonic drinks. Those are always there, or maybe a Red Bull type thing. I don't really drink those, but that's the zone they're in. And then I can hit the snacks, the candy bars, the energy bars, nuts, maybe dried fruit. Even on the way, I grab some, maybe a couple of fresh pieces of fruit, maybe a couple of apples, and maybe one banana or something, or things like in the deli section, even potato salad or stuff that I can eat while I'm packing the bike, or if I'm going to stop and take a little break, those 30-minute breaks. This is a great time to have those kind of foods. And then, also McDonald's or other fast food places. I even put some notes in here about the, sort of the reasonable economic sandwiches and their calorie counts, the ones that I would grab and eat and that they wouldn't really bother me too much. So like a McChicken, a McDouble, a double cheeseburger kind of thing, and they're all sort of around the $2 or $2.50 mark, and about 400 calories plus or minus. So those kind of things. Grab a coffee and or breakfast sandwiches, sort of equivalent pricing, and I hope so anyway. And I'm working in Canadian dollars as well, so the exchange rate is really quite poor at the moment. And I have some notes here on gas station stuff. So maybe there's packaged bakery goods or other bars, candy bars, that kind of thing. Ice. On hot days, I can grab ice and put it into the jersey pockets. Help also to keep Mira cool. She'll have some pockets on her jacket, so I can pack myself there, put it into bottles, and then at McDonald's and sometimes at these gas stations, Powerade, so I can fill up maybe a bladder or bottles. And so I have the added electrolytes and carb in there at a pretty economical price, and we can get going. The other thing I put in here is Mira's food. So in 2023, I don't think either one of us really ate enough. I was, for myself, going for about 300 calories an hour. I think I hit that. I was pretty close. I don't think it was enough. I think, and especially if we're gonna do a north and southbound this year, being able to just keep that along. And I think what I'm gonna do is, it's not, I'm basically gonna eat until I can't eat anymore constantly. And there are some techniques too to help protect my palate from fatigue, or just want to be careful about scratching maybe the roof of my mouth with stuff if you eat it too quickly. Those sort of things. So yeah, but for Mira, there was times when she was very fatigued, and part of that is the activity, part of that is how I managed her energy up and over climbs. But I think the other thing is I just didn't feed her enough. And so I have some notes here on how much an average dog or an active dog of her weight eats. And typically what she's been getting are 2 big handfuls, big scoops in the morning and in the evening, and then water throughout the day and at the meals. So now that's going to be increased. And then I have notes here on what these companies recommend, what the macros are in these foods and the breakdowns for those, and then choosing higher calorie foods if that's an option at grocery stores. And then I'll add on to these things as well, maybe some bone broth. But any of this stuff, if you have questions, I'm not a veterinarian, so this is stuff that you need to talk to your vet, the one that cares for your dog, about if you're going to do an event like this with your dog. I think by keeping her energy, her calorie consumption coming up, she can then better deal with all the energy expenditure. Talk about last here in this episode is budgeting, and I have it built for 21 days, and it's all in Canadian dollars. And like I said, that exchange rate is really quite poor now. So if these numbers seem high to some of you, it's because they're not in the US currency. I've estimated 21 days. I'm hoping I can do it in less time than that, at about $125, so probably about close to $100 US per day, looking at just 26, 25 in Canadian dollars, more or less. So, and then Mira's food, 2 kilogram bags, or the sort of 4 to 5 pound bags, something like $25 each. And she's gonna need about a bag and a half a week. So yeah, I've basically said that's going to be, even though the numbers don't quite match up, I've kind of put aside $125. And then hotel stays, I have 6 budgeted here. And that's the thing, they were just so expensive. And then a lot of these hotels, of course, will charge an extra service fee if you bring a dog, if they allow a dog. So that's sort of accommodation and food. Tire replacement, definitely going to need a rear tire at some point to wear out the tread. We'll call that $100. Unexpected costs, so medical, mechanical, maybe a rest day. Who knows what could happen, right? I mean, that could be weather-wise. It could be lots of things. So I put in $500 for there. Insurance, putting $1,000 there, should there be an incident on this event. So this little guy I carry on my person when I'm racing, and so it pings back. It's the dot you're following is being sent from this thing, if you're watching the dot. So for SOS features, it might not be myself, could be someone else, right? Could be a road incident. We passed some rivers, lots of things. If I recall correctly, it ends up being about $45 or $50 a month for the plan to ping enough to do it enough times. And I'm gonna put a contingency fee at 15%. So it comes to $65, $55 for those 21 days is what I kind of have set aside there. If we basically double this, that would be my budget for Mira's food, my food, bike service. I don't need a chain on the bike. I have to do very little service to the drivetrain because I have a pinion drive unit and a Gates carbon belt, so I don't need to replace that. Even if we do the yo-yo back and forth, even after all that distance, I won't need to service the gear unit, and all I have to do is clean the belt, and maybe if it gets a little dry and dusty, add some soap on it to stop a squeak. That's it. It's pretty low maintenance. I won't get into the income side of the budget other than to say Patreon is great. You get early access to the videos and some other perks. Super thanks if you feel that's something you want to do. It really helps us do our thing. This seems like a lot of planning and a lot of boredom and but what I think it allows is for us to just really focus in on the experience, on the day-to-day, moment-by-moment experience, because I know where my food's going to come from. I've set aside the money. I know generally where I'm trying to get to for a hotel and how often that might happen, and that Mira is getting enough food throughout this event. So I think all of those kind of things, you know, really, it's really helpful to do this kind of planning. And I think one of the amazing things that I saw in 2023 was just all of these people that had, you know, they have full-time jobs, kids, and other commitments. They're like me, middle-aged. People had all kinds of different levels of fitness and health and whatnot. But what was consistent throughout was amazing was that people had committed and taken this time and put in this preparation. They had physically trained and mentally thought about what they're doing and made some planning and thought deeply about what equipment they would take and all of those things. And it just and then the route itself isn't that hard. It's not massive elevation gains. Nothing is super steep. There's only a few mandatory hike-a-bikes, and you can push your bike. You don't have to carry your bike. But when you race it, it becomes this different field of competition, and the competition is just you and your mind and the weather and the route. And so it's really quite amazing. And then you can be riding with someone, you're passing them, or you're being passed, or you meet them at a resupply. And there's just this connection because you're all kind of suffering through the same thing that you chose to do, and it's really beautiful. It's really lovely. And every day I would get emotional on the route. Partly that's spending all that much energy, but it's also, it's a really beautiful thing. So if you go to do this, I hope that you got some value out of how Mira and I are approaching it this year. Maybe that's something that's useful for you. You might want to do it in a different way, and some of the things that were talked about here. Thanks. Hope you got